All right. Hi. So, I guess I'll continue where I left off on Zeld's. I need to get something to drink. So I think I'm actually getting sick. Yesterday and today my throat's been feeling really off. And today, like after the last stream doing the Wheel of Struggle, I decided to lay down for a quick nap. Woke up and my throat still feels like it's constricted somehow. I don't know how to describe it because I don't feel a tickling in my throat. I don't feel like coughing. I don't feel like it's plugged up or anything, but it feels like something's happening in my lymph nodes. And I don't know how to describe it. It just feels like something's wrong. My sinuses feel stuffy as well, but not as bad as what it could be, I guess you could say. Alright, so let's go ahead, and get this game booted up. Oh, that's the wrong thing. There we go. Let's see, capture, let's get the game refreshed here. Sweet, I don't see it on my TV. Okay. Okay, cool. Hold on. Okay. It's not any different from any other fucking spells that do that shit, but okay. Sorry, being a nerd. Saw a post. Let me pull up chat here, and let's get some music going. I don't know what I'm in the mood for, though, music-wise. I know I want to listen to something. Oh, let's see. I mean, we could listen to a podcast. Some Lovecraft shit. Yeah, you know what? Let's do some Lovecraft shit. Can't go wrong with that.
This is the BBC.
Yeah.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
A little housekeeping before we start. Mystery Machine is just one of the podcasts we make here at Red Hook Stories.
All right,
I'd urge
sweet.
you to check out the collection of oddities in Catherine Melman's History of Crime series, Bite Size Noir, and Kevin Dobbs' reportage show, Here and Now. That's Here, H-E-A-R. You can find details of both at the Red Hook website and subscribe through whatever podcast software you use. Our shows are not advertiser funded because we like to keep the audio clean and honest. Our financing comes
All
direct
right, let's
from
take
you,
a look
the listeners.
at...
If you like our shows,
Ooh, they
like
added
to
more
hear
to the
of them,
interactive
head over
map.
to our
Holy
crowdfunding
shit.
Site where for a modest
Okay.
monthly
What
donation,
are
you can get a
these?
whole load of behind-the-scenes goodies, merchandise, and previews
Relief?
of forthcoming episodes. Details of that are on the Red Hook website too.
I don't know what that means.
Okay, admin over.
That's
If
fine.
this is your first time listening to the Mystery Machine, you've picked a perfect time to join
What are
us.
these lines?
We're starting a brand new story today, and
Oh,
we
the
think
lines
this
are
one
for
is going to
things.
be really
Okay, never
interesting.
mind. I know what those
We
are.
don't know where it ends up because we haven't got to the bottom of it ourselves yet. But what we've uncovered so far is, well, intriguing. Doesn't really do it justice.
Okay.
I'm Matthew Hayward, and
Let's
this
see. I'm
is the Mystery
currently
Machine.
around there. Wait, where am I? So, let's see, that's that
We're
lake.
always on the lookout for stories. Even
There.
when we're in the middle of one, we're always keeping
Okay.
our ears to the ground for the next thing. That means always being alert to those little snippets of information that might indicate there's something buried that's worth digging up. What we're looking at from today started life as a locked room mystery.
Ah,
On the 6th of March 2017, a man went missing from a secure psychiatric hospital just outside Providence, Rhode Island. The last person to see the man that night had been his doctor, who had visited him in his room. According to multiple accounts, doctor and patient spoke for about an hour. Then the doctor left and the patient was locked in for the night. When the orderlies entered his room the next morning, he was empty. The door was locked from the outside, the windows were secured. No way in or out, but no patient. So, that's interesting enough. It's strange. Maybe someone let him out. That's the most logical explanation. But the police interviewed everyone, and they seemed satisfied that no one had done that. There was nothing on the CCTV, and the guard in the corridor outside swore that he hadn't left his post. So, it's like the start of a Sherlock Holmes mystery. Except there just doesn't seem to be an answer to this one. Improbable or not. And so if something is that much of a mystery, if it's actually unsolvable, then we don't have a show. We always need a thread to pull, something we can build a story around. And in this case, there just didn't seem to be a thread. So we moved on. And at the time, we instead told the story of Wayne Dawson and the disappearance of those 5 women in Nottingham back in the 1890s. That turned out to be one of our most popular stories. If you haven't checked it out, you can find the episodes on our website. So, now cut to 2 months ago.
All right, now I just
Kennedy
gotta get
Fisher, our
across.
investigator extraordinaire, had planted a flag, as she calls it.
I absolutely did not call
What
it
do you
that.
call it then?
I didn't call it anything. I set up some news alerts, like I always do if we move on from something, in case the story develops.
All right, well, do you want to pick it up?
Sure. So, the last person to see Charles Ward...
That's the missing patient's name.
You didn't do that yet?
I was saving it up.
Okay. Yeah. The last person to see him was his psychiatrist, Dr. Jonathan Willett. Now, Willett gave a statement to the police at the time, and there was no suggestion that he did anything wrong or was involved in the disappearance in any way. But 2 months ago, my news alert pings.
An American psychiatrist, Dr. Jonathan Willett, has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Lucy Hawthorne at her home in Highgate in May this year. The court heard that Willett forced his way into Miss Hawthorne's home and stabbed her multiple times with a kitchen knife.
Dr. Willett had apparently been experiencing an acute paranoid schizophrenic episode, and the judge sent him to Broadmoor, which, for those of you who don't know, is a high-security psychiatric facility down in Berkshire. So Willett came to England. This distinguished psychiatrist with no criminal record, no history of mental disturbance, and he murdered a woman. And that may have had nothing whatsoever to do with the missing patient back in Rhode Island, but Kennedy saw it as a weird little coincidence.
And I don't believe in coincidences.
So now there was a thread, and we started pulling it. And the story we uncovered, the story that we're still uncovering, this one is not over yet, and we don't know how deep it's going to go. This has to be the single strangest thing any of us at the Mystery Machine have ever encountered.
Damn it. I fucked up. Just chill.
We're calling it
Just chill.
The Case of Charles Dexter Ward.
So, what has prompted this sudden interest in your ancestry, Charles?
Well, I don't think it's sudden. Does it seem sudden?
Well, perhaps it's just new to me,
I want to know who I am.
in the sense that...
In every sense. I don't think I'm the person they think I am.
Well, who's they?
People. You. My family.
You or your family don't know who you are.
My mother did. But she lied.
What did she lie about, Charles?
I was up in the attic and I
Interesting.
found something.
Okay.
She had one of those old files, you know, those things that stretch out?
Concertina file?
A birth certificate was in there. My grandfather, her father. That's not the name on the birth certificate.
What's the name?
Joseph Kerwin.
So that was Dr. Jonathan Willett talking to Charles Dexter Ward when Ward was, what, 17?
Yeah, he just turned 17. His mother had died a few months before.
So is that why he's seeing Dr. Willett?
No, Ward had been seeing Willett as a patient pretty much since 8th grade,
Which, for the British listeners...
like 13 years old.
So, he'd been seeing a psychiatrist since he was 13.
Yeah, but there's stuff we do and don't know here. Willett recorded a bunch of their conversations. I guess that was his practice. And some of those tapes are on record from when Charles Ward disappeared, and they were part of the investigation. But there's a whole bunch of client-patient confidentiality stuff, which means that what we have is incomplete, and so there's some guesswork we're having to do. It seems like Charles was a problem kid from way before his mother died.
Do we know what she died of?
We do? She was hit by a car. A hit and run, so they never caught the guy.
Okay, so there was no illness or anything that might have caused Charles distress when he was younger?
Not that we know of. Charles Ward had been taken out of school when he was 15 years old. Apparently he wasn't a good fit. He was a loner. Kind of weird.
Weird how?
Well, I tracked down the principal of the school Ward was attending in 9th grade. Her name was Claire Rushmore. She asked us not to name the school, and she doesn't work there anymore. but she certainly seems to have remembered Charles Ward.
I'm not gonna be able to
Well,
make that.
I'm not sure. It seems unprofessional.
You spoke to the police, Mrs. Rushmore, when they were investigating Charles Ward's disappearance.
Well, yes, but I...
So that's a matter of public record. I'm not asking you to tell me anything you didn't say to them.
No, well, I suppose. He was a difficult boy. And that's not what we have difficult. All schools have difficult children. But Charles Ward was more than that. There was a darkness to him.
What do you mean by darkness?
Well, he was anti-authority, certainly. But again, we always have a few pupils like that. Often they come from difficult backgrounds, though. And I don't think that could be said of Charles. But he didn't mix well.
Was he bullied?
Oh, no, I should say not. If anything, the other children were afraid of him.
So he was violent?
No, not violent. I understand. This is a little frustrating. The police had the same issue when I talked to them. The truth is, it was not something you could put a finger on. It was just there was something about him that prompted disquiet, maybe you could say. Something that was kind of off. The other children seemed to sense it, but his teachers, too.
And you talked to Mr. and Mrs. Ward about this?
Oh, I did, yes, on a number of occasions.
She said that sometimes when you bring parents in, they tell you that they don't recognize your description of their child. The kid's not like this at home, and so on. And sometimes she said that really is the case, and other times, you know, they're just being defensive. Which is understandable, I guess. No one wants to accept that their kid is difficult. But in the case of Mr. and Mrs. Ward...
Well, the father. I just think he wasn't around very much. I don't think he had a close relationship with Charles, and certainly there was a sense that he felt he had better things to do than be hauled in to see the school principal. But the mother... I think Mrs. Ward connected with what I was saying. I think she was scared.
Of her son?
I think so. Again, not physically. But I shouldn't say this. But I really don't know how to explain it to you. We never had anything like the incidents that happened in some other schools.
Incidents?
With guns, I mean.
School shootings.
I think if I had to articulate the one underlying reason why I called the Wards in, and I'm not saying... Let me put it this way. If it was on TV a year or two later that a school shooting had occurred, and they had put up a picture of Charles Ward, I would not have been surprised.
I'm standing on Prospect Street, which is in the College Hill area of Providence. College Hill is a really nice neighborhood, one of the most affluent in the area. And at 100 Prospect Street, right where I'm standing, is what was, until a few years ago, the Ward House. It was built, I'm guessing, around the turn of the century, and it's a big house. I mean, it's a mansion by any standards. This was a family with money. Claire Rushmore, the school principal, said she was worried that Charles Ward was the kind of person who becomes a school shooter, and when you think of that, you generally picture someone from a more deprived background than this. I don't think a lot of school shooters come from places like College Hill.
Built in 1924, and as you can see, it's a very fine example of the period. All the original fittings and details.
I wanted to get a look inside the house, and as it's on the market at the moment, I called up the realtor, a man who goes by the incredible name of Sylvester Birtwistle.
Affluent neighborhood, a very safe, excellent schools.
But you can't sell it.
You cannot sell this property.
And why do you think that is?
Well, if I had to guess, I'd say it's the atmosphere.
And he's right. It's a great house in a nice neighborhood, and houses like this are in high demand in Providence. But this one just feels unwelcoming.
I've had people who were terribly excited saw from the outside, but then entered the property, turned around and walked right back out.
But nothing happened here that you know of.
Not that I'm aware. The Ward family were very unfortunate, as you know. Sarah Ward was hit by a car. The son was locked up in an insane. In a
psychiatric institution?
Quiet. And before that, Howard Ward, the father. Now, I don't understand the ins and outs of finance, but it seems he was very successful just after his wife died. And it seems he'd made a number of bad investments. By the time he passed away in 2013, there was almost no money left.
And the house has been empty since 2016, when Charles Ward was... You mind if I take a look around?
Oh, be my guest.
Sylvester told me that Charles's room was the second on the right up the stairs, and I wanted to take a look at it, even though I didn't really think it would yield any clues. Okay, this is quite weird. The room is empty, It's pretty big. There's not much light because this side of the house is shaded by a big old tree. There's a fireplace, but no furniture. That's all been cleared out, I guess, maybe sold. But there's a smell. Like someone recently lit a fire in the grate, which it doesn't look like they have. And I was, ah!
You okay?
Yeah, the wind just must have caught the door and made me jump. Sorry. I don't know what made that door slam. Maybe it was the wind, but when I heard the noise and I turned around, I could swear there was someone there. A man, standing behind the door with his back to the wall, just staring at me.
Wow, so you really think there was something there?
No, of course not. I mean, it seemed real in the moment.
For context, you're hearing me and Kennedy in the cafe across the road from the Mystery Machine studio.
It was a trick of the light or a shadow cast by something going by.
We tend to do a lot of our catch-ups and stuff there, especially when we're still figuring out stories.
Is this going to be a ghost story, you think?
It's not a ghost story.
And we always record these meetings because, well, because I suppose we pretty much record everything.
Charles Dexter Ward is a weird character. I don't know what happened to him, but there's something there. Something more than him just being a troubled kid.
I think the books are interesting.
The books are definitely interesting.
The books refers to a recording Kennedy had played me a few minutes earlier of her visit to the librarian at Charles Ward's school. Kennedy thought she might be able to get an insight into Charles by looking at what books he signed out from the school library. This is the recording I'd just listened to.
So I'm here in the library of the school that Charles Ward was in up until 10th grade.
You don't have to whisper.
Hi.
Hello. Are you Miss Fisher?
Kennedy, hi. Mr. Shepley?
George.
And you're the librarian here at...
Yeah, I don't think we're meant to be identifying the school.
No, sure. So you know why I'm here?
I do, and I think this is going to be interesting.
Oh?
Yeah, I dug around in the archives, which is something I have always wanted to say, but what I actually mean is I did a search on Ward Charles
Oh wait,
Dexter
you know what? I just
on the
realized I could
library
probably...
computer system.
First thing is more Buffy.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because the list of books I found was actually very Buffy indeed. Well, kind of Evil Willow, really.
Here we go.
Okay, here we go. And before anyone gets the wrong idea, I should point out that we have an arrangement with the municipal library here in Providence, and they in turn can order books in. I wouldn't want anyone to think we actually have these books on the shelves of the school library.
Turba Philosophorum, Key of Wisdom, The Complete Mystical Records of Dr. John Dee, The Book of Thoth, Enochian Magic. Wow, this list.
Goes on, doesn't it? Can't fault the boy's appetite.
He was allowed to check these books out of the school library at age 14, 15?
Okay, I think it's important to note that I was not the librarian at the time, and with respect to my predecessor, I would have taken a very different view on the matter. What do you think happened about the disappearance?
I have no idea. Do you?
I took an interest after you called, and I saw this list. I looked up Charles Ward. I confess I didn't know the story before. It's strange.
It seems to be.
You know something that did jump out at me? And I don't mean to derail what you're doing or...
Oh, derail away.
Okay, so Charles Ward left the school in 2007. The records refer to it as a mutual arrangement, which basically means the school called his parents and said, don't send your kid here anyhow.
Yeah, I got that much.
So then I wanted to see where he went after that, but he didn't transfer to a different school.
No, he had a private tutor.
Yeah. Do you know who that was?
Yes, I do. Barbara Sayers. I'm going to see her tomorrow morning.
Okay.
What?
Can you do me a favor? You give me a call when you've spoken to her?
Sure.
Just indulge me.
So while Kennedy had been out in the States digging around in the Charles Dexter Ward story, I'd been here trying to figure out what Dr. Willett had been doing in London. I managed to put together a biography of Willett, which we'll get to soon, but I couldn't figure out what brought him here. Had his experiences with Charles Ward sent him off the rails? Or was his trip to London completely unrelated to Ward's disappearance? And then there's obviously the murder of Lucy Hawthorne. Was that in any way connected, or was it just the most bizarre coincidence? At this point, we still didn't know if we had anything. The Charles Ward story could be interesting, but it could equally just be disturbed kid gets into the occult and goes crazy. And the disappearance could be, well, I don't know, but we weren't sure we had enough leads to set a Mystery Machine story in motion. So I called up an old contact of mine to see if there was any way I could get to talk to Dr. Willett in Broadmoor.
Not a chance.
Really? What if I wrote a letter to the warden?
You can write all the letters you want. There's no way anyone's letting some ex-columnist with a podcast talk to a paranoid schizophrenic in maximum security. It's an interesting story, though.
Oh, we don't even know if it is a story yet.
Oh, well, it is a story. I'd advise you to tread a little carefully there.
Really? Why?
Because of Lucy Hawthorne.
The murder victim? What about her?
You don't have researchers or anything there?
We have an investigator.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like her voice.
She's been off looking at the American angle.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but if you want the juice on Willett, look at Lucy Hawthorne.
Oh, what am I looking for?
Well, I can't back this up with paperwork, but as I understand it, Lucy Hawthorne was pretty well connected.
Oh, okay, I can look into that. But I thought that Willett's attack on her was random.
Right.
No?
Well, I'm sure that's what you thought. Listen, I don't know, maybe it was. I just heard some rumours which I'm not about to repeat on tape. But I'd look into it.
And?
Well, I looked at Lucy Hawthorne's close family, and there's nothing remarkable there. Home counties, middle class, parents divorced when she was a teenager. Her mum moved abroad, her dad died a couple of years ago.
Oh?
Heart attack. He'd had a couple already, nothing unusual about it.
So how old was Lucy? I don't even know.
She was 28.
And what did she do?
She was a journalist.
Okay, that's something.
No, it's not. She reviewed computer games.
Huh. How did she afford to live in Highgate?
Well, I wondered that, but it wasn't really Highgate. She had the ground floor flat in a house off the Archway Road.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not seeing anything.
Me neither. Until I found out that the grandparents on her mother's side are called Tillinghast.
Well, that's a name.
Isn't it? And the grandfather's name is Godfrey, if you can believe that.
Godfrey Tillinghast? I'm guessing there's not a lot of those on Google.
No, there's one. And I suspect this is the reason my contact said to tread carefully. Sir Godfrey Tillinghast. He was Cabinet Secretary from 2008 to 2016.
And Cabinet Secretary is?
The head of the civil service. Some people would argue it's the most powerful position in the country. There are the people who elect, and then there are the people who actually run things. And Sir Godfrey Tillinghast was in charge of them. He's retired now, but one assumes he still has a fair amount of influence.
And it's definitely him.
Yeah. He and his wife Caroline have one daughter, Emma, and Emma is Lucy Hawthorne's mother. So on the one hand, that maybe explains why Dr. Willett's trial and sentencing happened so fast.
And on the other hand?
Well, my contact seems to think there was something more there. Now, it's certainly interesting that Lucy Hawthorne was very well connected, but I can't see how it's relevant.
Unless she wasn't randomly chosen as a victim.
And that's one of many questions we're going to be tackling moving forward. Did Dr. Willett deliberately target the granddaughter of a senior civil servant? If so, why? And does it have anything to do with the disappearance of Charles Dexter Ward? At this point, we were pretty sure we had a story worth investigating. But 2 days after Kennedy and I had that conversation in the cafe, we discovered we were into the weirdest story we'd ever heard. But we're going to save that for next time. This is The Mystery Machine. It's always stranger than you think.
Hello, I'm Tina Dahealy, and alongside Matthew Price, we host the Beyond Today podcast from the BBC. Each weekday, we will tackle some of the biggest news stories with help from some of the best and most informed journalists in the BBC. This is the news podcast that jumps right in to give you that little bit more. So make sure you head over to the BBC Sounds app and search for Beyond Today and subscribe. If you'd like to join the chat, make sure you use our hashtag BBC Beyond.
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Tell me about this tutor of yours, Charles.
Miss Sayers? What about her?
She seems to employ a rather unusual curriculum.
She believes in tailoring the education to the pupil.
Is that right? And what does that mean in practice?
I don't understand what you want to know, Doctor. Do you want details of every lesson?
Your manner has changed, Charles, and I'm concerned about the books you've been reading.
Well, maybe you should talk to Miss Sayers.
You're frightened of her, aren't you?
What you just heard was a recording of Charles Dexter Ward, aged 15, talking to his therapist, Dr. Jonathan Willett. This is episode 2 of the case of Charles Dexter Ward. If you're just joining us, I'd advise you to start at episode 1 and work your way through.
I'm aiming like shit
Still
now.
here? Okay then. I'm Matthew Hayward. This is The Mystery Machine. this point, Charles had been excluded from his school and was being tutored at home by a woman named Barbara Sayers.
Hi, Miss Sayers. It's Kennedy Fisher.
Barbara Sayers was Charles Dexter Ward's tutor from the point that he left school in 2007 up until just after his mother's death in 2011. She still lives in Providence, Rhode Island, so Kennedy Fisher went to talk to her.
Barbara Sayers is tall and willowy. I've since discovered that she's in her late 60s, but standing in the room with her, she could easily be 10 or 15 years younger than that. Her apartment is incredibly neat and ordered, and there are a lot of plants in there and a lot of books.
I believe tea should always be served in warm china.
It's really nice. Comfortable.
Tray. Yes, I got it in London back in, 1990 or thereabouts. It's lasted me very long. What is the design? I haven't seen that before.
The tea tray has a really unusual motif on it. It's a series of circles, or maybe globes, I guess, joined by this web of interconnecting lines.
I have no idea. I just like the look of it. You're recording all of this?
If that's okay.
I don't imagine your listeners are very interested in my tea tray.
Well, we'll probably cut that bit out.
Well, certainly. You just fire away.
So we talked a little bit on the phone, so you know we're doing a story about Charles Dexter Ward.
Indeed.
And I was hoping you could give us some insight into...
Insight? Oh,
you taught him after he was school.
Yes, it's fine. Mr. Ward was adamant Charles should have an equivalent education to that which he would have received in high school. I flatter myself that we did a little better than equivalence. Charles was a very good student. Oh, very attentive. Yes.
Because I've been led to believe by the principal of the school that...
Well, that place wasn't really set up for. Modern education is a factory system, you understand. They want to turn out a certain kind of person into the workforce, and anyone that doesn't conform.
So you think the problem was with the school?
That was a bit delayed.
Was that Charles was far too bright for that environment. I believe in you did. And when you bore a 14-year-old boy, well, then you have trouble on your hands.
But he was no trouble for you?
None whatsoever, no. A delight to teach.
But he was already seeing Dr. Willett at the time, is that right?
Well, that man,
Dr. Willett.
You know, I suppose, what became of him. So, I think it calls into question anything he had to say on the subject of Charles Dexter Ward. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, nonetheless, though, if the Wards thought it was necessary for Charles to...
That was his mother. A delightful woman, very capable, but... Well, I believe she was prone to fashionable views about child psychology.
So you never found Charles to be, in any way, dark?
Heavens, no. A delight.
Okay, but he was incarcerated.
Incarcerated?
In a secure psychiatric...
Well, that was Dr. Willett's doing. And as I say, we know what became of him.
As I explained to him, we're at the early stages of our investigation, so we might have to have a sense of what might be important and what might just be... There's a recording of a conversation between Charles Ward and Dr. Willett. The name Joseph Kerwin, does that mean anything to you?
I see your agenda here.
I don't think
it's cheap sensationalism, and I'm sorry, but I'll have no part of it.
Well,
I had hoped you were intending to find poor Charles Ward.
Well, that would certainly be... I think a step along the way would be to discover the kind of person he was, wouldn't it?
I believe I told you that, Miss Fisher. Charles Dexter Ward was a charming boy and a diligent student. Beyond that, I'm afraid I have nothing more to say, and I'm certainly not prepared to start digging up the past of that poor family for your... You've wasted both our time coming here.
Hello?
Well, that was weird.
Haha, tell me.
Well, she's kind of eccentric, I guess.
I had heard this.
This is George Shepley, the school librarian. He'd asked me to check in with him after I met with Barbara Sayers. He'd hinted that he had something to say about her, but he wanted me to meet with her first. She kind of freaked out towards the end.
Okay, what was the trigger?
Well, she's really not a fan of Dr. Willett. But actually, it was the mention of Joseph Kerwin that really seemed to rile her.
Okay, I don't know who that is.
No, neither do we yet. It's a name that came up in a recording we have of Dr. Willett talking to Charles Ward, but we
Wait. Is this the cult leader?
The what?
There was a guy, maybe his name was Kerwin. I think it was. This would be years ago, late 70s, early 80s, one of those siege-type scenarios. Bunch of people, some kind of cult, holed up in a house, and the FBI had the place surrounded. Big gunfight, maybe a fire. I think this Kerwin guy was like the guru or whatever. I think he died. He got shot or died in the house somehow.
Okay. So, what were you going to tell me about Barbara Sayers?
That she's a witch.
Seriously?
No. Okay, maybe not. But I did hear she was into some pretty wacky stuff back in the day. But I think it was more like hippie stuff. But maybe she knew this Kerwin guy?
Yeah. I don't know how that fits into anything.
It doesn't matter. That's not actually what I was going to tell you.
Okay. So,
Well, you asked me who would let a 14-year-old check out books on the occult.
Right.
So who do you think was the school librarian back in 2007?
Oh my God.
I know, right? Barbara Sayers and Charles Ward apparently had this big connection, and when he got kicked out of the school, she quit and went to work as his tutor.
She even looks like a librarian.
I find that to be an offensive stereotype.
How could you not tell me this before?
I was interested to know if she'd volunteered the information. I have her resume here from the school files.
Can you scan it to me?
Sure. Or I could give it to you if we met up. Maybe dinner? Or...
Interactive map is being
Well, it's none
dumb.
of your business.
Which is not a no.
Did I dial the wrong number? Is this a relationship counseling
No?
session?
Okay, none of my business. So, are you going to go back to Barbara Sayers?
Yeah, but not today. I don't even think she would answer the door to me today. Even then, what am I going to say? Were you a librarian? Did you know a cult leader? I think we need more.
Makes sense. So, what next?
Well, I'm about to get on a train to New York.
And what's in New York?
Tyler Green. I found him.
So we're leaping ahead a little here. We wanted to understand more about Charles Dexter Ward's background, and so Kennedy and I had been going through the recordings we had of his conversations with Dr. Willett. Tyler Green's name came up in this one, from when Charles was about 12.
What did you do today, Charles?
I read.
All day?
Yes.
You didn't go outside, young boy, in glorious weather like this? So what were you reading?
Just books.
What books?
And letters.
Letters from who?
I don't know.
Well, who sent you the letters?
No one sent them to me. I found them.
Reading other people's correspondences.
Shit, the shield.
See these letters?
I burned them.
I don't believe you. Where did you find the letters?
I didn't find them. Tyler found them.
Tyler? Tyler Green, your friend.
He was my friend.
Well, what happened?
He moved away. I'd like to move away.
But where would you go?
London.
London? London, England? And what would you do in London?
I like those weird audio
Tyler
glitches.
Green doesn't live in Providence anymore. He left when he was 12 years old. I tracked him down to New York City, where he now works in publishing.
I don't think it's fair to say he was always like that, how the school principal described him. I mean, well, maybe that's her experience, I guess, because of the time she knew him. But I knew him before that, and he was a pretty normal kid in my recollection. Kind of tall, taller than me. I mean, taller than most of us, and gawky. One of those kids who grew upwards really fast, but not outwards, you know? I remember my mom used to say if he turned side on, he'd be invisible. And he had this hair that was so blonde, it was almost white. So I think it got a little darker.
So when are we talking?
Well, we were about the same age, a couple months apart, so I'm thinking when we were maybe 11 or 12. 12, I guess, because the time I'm thinking about was the last summer I was in Providence, so yeah, that would have been when I was 12. Well, we used to hang out, play video games.
Normal kid stuff.
Right. And there was this derelict house down the street, a couple blocks away. We used to hang out in there. You could get in through the trap door, like a loading door that went in the basement from the backyard and then up into the house. Charles always used to bang his head on the door frame at the top of those stairs. And we never told anyone because, I guess we knew it probably wasn't safe, whatever, and the grown-ups would pitch a fit, But we spent most of the days there during the summer break that year. And Charles was really into old things, and he found that house just fascinating. He always wanted to pretend we lived there and it was another time from the past,
That house was on Olney Street in Providence. It's not there anymore. The whole street was demolished in 2008. There's a reference on one of the recordings Dr. Willett made of Charles. A reference to some letters Charles Ward says you found?
Right, yeah. So this would have been within the last couple of weeks of summer vacation. I remember it got real hot and we were right at the top of the old house.
The derelict house.
We were in the attic because you could get a breeze moving through there if you opened the windows at the front because there was some roof tiles missing in the back, big holes so the breeze off of the ocean would just come right through. And we hadn't spent a lot of time up there before it got hot, so this was a new area of the house to us. But it was too hot to really explore, and Charles was pretty convinced the floor wasn't safe, and so we shouldn't move around on it too much. So we were sitting and talking. I don't remember what about. And I noticed this thing sticking out of the wall.
What Tyler Green had seen was a piece of paper that turned out to be the corner of an envelope poking through a gap in some wall panel. The boys investigated, and they used Charles's pocket knife to prise the panel away from the wall, revealing a hollowed-out area, just a few inches deep, a hiding place. And in that hiding place, there was...
a load of letters. Correspondence. Love letters, I guess you'd say. But all one way, all from one person, a man to presumably a woman who had lived in the house. They were handwritten and the writing was super scrawly and hard to decipher, but it was steamy stuff, you know. Definitely R-rated in places, which to a couple of 12-year-old boys, well, you can imagine it piqued our interest.
But these weren't just love letters. As Charles and Tyler worked through them, they found there was more to them than met the eye.
Oh, there was a bunch of weird stuff in there. Stuff written in other languages, these weird symbols and diagrams. I thought maybe it was spy stuff, you know. The books and movies I was into at the time, I thought we discovered some kind of dead drop for Russian spies or something.
Can you remember anything specific about the letters?
Not really. They were in envelopes and they were addressed to that house, but I don't remember the name of the person. They were signed with initials. I want to say JC.
Where's the chest?
JC.
I mean, that's how I'm remembering it, but I don't know. It sounds right.
Chest
Tyler and
and
Charles spent the afternoon reading through the letters, but Tyler said they couldn't make head nor tail of most of them.
Chest is not in there.
When it came time to leave, Charles wanted to take the letters with him, and Tyler said he didn't really care, so...
We were supposed to be hanging out again the next day, but he didn't show up. When I finally got hold of him, he said he was busy and he was kind of short with me, so I got a bit pissed about that. I don't recall seeing him again. Yeah, I went away to school a week or so later, and then my parents moved up to Vermont during my first semester, so... yeah, I never went back to Providence. Yeah, that could have been the last time I saw Charles.
Hi, could you help me? I'm looking to find out who owned a house that was demolished here about 10 years ago. Back in Providence, I went to City Hall to get a look at their records and see who owned that house. The chances are, whoever lived there at the time the letters were written would have been the recipient of those letters.
So we want to look at the records.
A woman named Alice came down to get me from the front desk and take me back to where they kept the records.
Well, it's probably somewhere here.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of files.
Yeah, they didn't start putting this stuff on the computer until around 2005. But if you say the house you're looking for was derelict at that time, chances are the ownership records might be on here somewhere. It's not as bad as it looks. It's pretty organized in here.
It actually ends up taking nearly an hour to find the Olney Street records because the street doesn't exist anymore. So Alice had to go digging in a whole other archive for the records.
Finally, Olney Street.
Come on, get off.
I don't know the number.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, the city runs pretty regular building inspections, so if it's derelict, we should find... Here we go. Number 23. That's a vacant property from around 1980.
That long?
Yeah, but somebody bought it in 1985. Name Weston? Mr. L.R. Weston?
Maybe. I was expecting a woman, but...
Well, Mr. Weston doesn't seem to have done anything to the property. He bought it pretty cheap. It had been empty for a few years according to this, and there were a bunch of repairs to do, but he just left it alone until the city bought him out to knock down the street.
He never lived there.
I don't think he ever lived in Providence. An out-of-towner. Maybe he bought it as some kind of investment, or he intended to move there, but plans changed.
So the last person to actually live there...
Yeah, the previous owner bought the place in 1977.
Damn it.
She lived there until... Well, it looks like the water and power were cut off to the property in October of 1980, so I'm guessing she either passed away or just left it.
She?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sayers. Barbara Sayers?
Are you kidding me?
I am absolutely not.
So Charles Dexter Ward is reading these letters that were sent to Barbara Sayers?
We think.
Well, to the house she was living in at the time. And they're from Joseph Kerwin.
Again, we have the initials JC, if Tyler Green is remembering it right.
And your librarian
Not mine.
said Kerwin was some kind of cult leader, and that Barbara Sayers was into that stuff.
Let's not leap to conclusion.
Am I leaping? I'm joining some dots here.
Yeah, but what is the picture?
These letters, are they the thing that turns Charles Dexter Ward from a regular kid who's out playing with his friend during the summer holidays into this dark character people are describing?
Honestly, I don't know. The timing works out, but whether the letters were the specific trigger...
There's something in those letters led him down this path into reading about the occult. Where are the letters?
I have no idea.
There must be somewhere. What happened to Charles Ward's possessions after he went into the psychiatric unit?
I'm working on that.
If we could get those letters.
Yeah.
You need to go back to Barbara Sayers.
Would it be super chicken to take someone with me?
No, you absolutely should. Every indication is that this woman is not... You should not go back in there alone.
You're gonna confront her with this.
I wouldn't say confront, but I have some questions.
Like, are you a witch?
That may not be one of them.
Damn it. But it's gonna be the thrust of the thing. Do you want me to ask that?
I would love you not to ask that.
You want me to be strong and silent?
I want you to be strong and silent waiting in the car.
What's left up here?
We're both librarians. You're worried if we get face-to-face, we're gonna get into it about the Dewey Decimal System,
God damn
derail
it.
the whole...
That would make an awesome podcast episode.
Someone should do that. Just each episode is 2 librarians discussing different forms of
Jesus.
classification. Is that...
That's Barbara Sayers' house. It's on fire.
Hello, it's me, Mae Martin. I hope you enjoyed the podcast you just listened to. Can I recommend
Wait,
another
what?
podcast that you might enjoy?
Oh,
it's called
right,
Grown Up
'cause
Blend,
that
and it's a
makes-
podcast for people who find the adult world a bit much. Every week, me, Bishop K. Alley, and
God
Ned
damn it.
Sedgwick, and tons of other guests try to get our heads around stuff that confuses us, like sex. Very confused by sex, fear, food, and friendship. I'm running out of time for this ad. Ned, how would you sum up the podcast?
I'd say it's like a guidebook for people who don't really know where they're going or where they've been.
Great, thanks, Ned. That's Grown Up Blend, and you can find it on BBC Sound.
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
From the archive of Dr. Jonathan Willett, this is a recording made in September 2010 of Willett talking to a 17-year-old Charles Dexter Ward.
What do you know about my grandfather?
Well, I don't think I
Look,
know
my
any-
real grandfather, I mean.
The real one?
Joseph Kerwin.
You mentioned this name before.
Yet my mother lied to me.
And why would she do that?
Joseph Kerwin was a great man.
How do you know that?
I've been doing some research.
I see. And what have you found?
Miss Sayers says he was a great man.
This is episode 3 of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. If you're just joining us, I'd advise you to start at episode 1 and work your way through. Still here? Okay then. I'm Matthew Hayward, and this is The Mystery Machine.
Is that? That's Barbara Sayers' house.
This was the home of Barbara Sayers, ex-school librarian, ex-tutor to Charles Dexter Ward, and the likely recipient of a collection of mysterious letters that Charles Ward had discovered as a young man in a derelict house in Providence. Miss Sayers was most certainly becoming a person of interest in our investigation. But now it looked like that particular strand of the story had come to an abrupt halt. Until
She's not dead.
Kennedy Fisher had stayed on that street for most of the night, but by late the following day...
They've been through the wreckage, the fire department, and they say there was no one there.
Do they have any idea how the fire started?
If they do, they're not sharing that information with random podcasters.
Well, what about the neighbours? Did
I
they...
talked to the neighbors. No one saw her leave yesterday. But she's definitely not in the house, which makes me think...
I think we need to be careful not to jump to conclusions.
I think that's easy to say from halfway across the Atlantic.
I'm actually all the way across the Atlantic.
Okay, well, from right here on the spot, this feels super weird and way more than a coincidence.
Oh, it's also a dead end.
Well, I'm not sure. We were talking about that.
Who's we?
George Shepley, the
Boyfriend.
librarian. You're an asshole. If Barbara Sayers did disappear deliberately, then it shows we're on the right track.
And if she didn't?
Then someone burned down her house and we're still on the right track.
Unless she went away and left something dodgy plugged in.
Okay, but let's not proceed on that basis, huh?
So we decided that Kennedy, and maybe this George Shepley character, who seemed to be becoming quite involved, would keep going on the background of Charles Dexter Ward. We still weren't clear on the timeline that led to Charles Ward being locked up in a psychiatric facility, nor did we have any clue as to how these events might have contributed towards Dr. Willett coming to England and murdering Lucy Hawthorne.
Because I don't have my other save
Meanwhile,
file.
we wanted more background on Barbara Sayers. She seemed to be a key player in the story, and yet we knew very little about her.
Hello?
Hi, is that Mrs. Talbot?
Hello?
Is that Melissa Talbot?
Oh, speaking.
There are far too many Barbara Sayers in the world for an internet search to be of much use, but a call to the school she used to work at, the one Charles Ward attended, yielded a result. On Barbara Sayers' personnel file, she'd listed a next of kin, her sister Melissa, who lived up in Vermont. Luckily for us, Melissa hadn't moved in the intervening years, and so I was able to track down a number for her. I explained that we were investigating Charles Dexter Ward's disappearance,
I'm afraid I don't know who that is.
and that her sister had been his tutor.
Oh, well, I haven't spoken to my sister for going on 40 years.
She told me that they'd grown up together. Melissa was a year older than Barbara. She said Barbara was always the clever one.
Always with a nose in a book, doesn't matter what it was. Someone stuck pages together, Bob would read it.
Melissa got married, straight out of high school, to an army engineer named Bruce Talbot, and his work took the couple off all around the world. Bruce died in 2003, and Melissa moved up to Vermont.
But it wasn't the Army's fault I lost touch with Bob. That was all on her. She was the big college hope of our family on account of all that reading, but instead she took off after that fella down in Rhode Island. Our mother was distraught.
What fella would that be?
Oh, I don't recall his name. I never set eyes on the man. Some kind of religious nut. Not that I'm against religion, you understand, but you take any good idea, and there's going to be some people that take the whole thing too far. Bob fell head over heels for this guy, and she used to write me these letters about how amazing and clever he was. Total phooey. He had her by the short hairs, as my husband used to say. And of course, you know it was all phooey, because soon enough I get a letter telling me she can't write no more on account of me being an outsider. And this Joseph, yeah, that was his name. This Joseph doesn't want members of his cult, or whatever they like to call it, to be polluted by the opinions of unbelievers.
His name was Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph, that's right.
Joseph Kerwin?
That's the fella, Kerwin. What kind of name is that, anyway? I never could figure that out. Well, so all that went badly wrong when the FBI or whoever got involved, and the last I heard of Barbara, she was off to England. She sent a Christmas card with a London postmark, and that would have been, I think, 1985, or maybe 86.
And you haven't heard from her at all since then?
Not a whisper. I don't know where she is, what her life is. I couldn't even tell you if my sister is alive or dead.
Well, we're pretty sure she's alive somewhere.
Well, if you're looking for her, I hope you find her safe and well, but please don't pass on my number. We've gone this long without speaking. I don't see as how getting together now would be a good idea.
Joseph Kerwin's coming up a lot here.
He really is.
Kennedy was back in the UK for a few days, and so we'd got together in our regular hangout across the road from the studio. So where do we have them? We have the letters to Barbara Sayers.
Right, and it sounds like she was a member of this cult he set up in Rhode Island.
Okay, so I've followed up on what your friend George Shetley said about that. They called themselves the Soldiers of Itkuaya, apparently after some character from Mesopotamian folklore. They had a place out near the coast, a house, and at some point the FBI and the ATF took an interest, and that led to a siege. Joseph Kerwin died. Either he got shot or he killed himself. And I guess if Barbara Sayers was there, she managed to get out.
Well, there's no record of her having to arrest them.
Right, so we have no way of knowing. Wait, you mean on her record, or...?
I mean on the arrest reports from the siege.
You found arrest reports?
Yeah, there's a guy in the records office at the police department here. It was I bearing the lead.
Oh my God. What did you find?
You got headphones? I'll play it to you. I've come to the city of Warwick, which is about 12 miles outside of downtown Providence. It's another old town, dating from the 1600s, and it's a lot quieter and a lot slower than Providence. The arrest reports from the siege got me nowhere in terms of tracking down the actual Soldiers of Itkuaya cult members.
You're the lady from the radio thing?
But there was another name on those reports, the arresting officer. Ezra Whedon? I'm Kennedy Fisher. Ezra is in his 70s now and retired. But back in 1980, he was a detective with the Providence Police Department.
You want to come in? You like coffee?
I love coffee.
I'm not talking about that flavored hazelnut bullshit you people drink now. What I have here is real cop coffee. Keep you up for days. You think you can handle that?
So long as I can get it iced with a splash of almond milk.
Oh, you're yanking my chain. You and I are going to get along just fine.
Ezra lives alone now. His wife died a few years ago. His house is small, but he keeps it neat and tidy. His police medal and citations are framed on the wall alongside pictures of his grandchildren, who live in Pennsylvania with their mom, Ezra's daughter, a lecturer at Carnegie Mellon. The coffee was exactly as strong as Ezra said it would be. It was like drinking rocket fuel. I asked him about the siege back in 1980.
Wow, that was a long time ago. What's got you looking into that?
Well, we're actually investigating the disappearance of a guy called Charles Dexter Ward.
Ah, Ward, yeah.
You know the case?
I read the local papers. Wow. I like the weird stuff. I always did.
Well, we're looking into what might have happened there, and there seems to be a connection to Joseph Kerwin.
What kind of connection?
Well, it's early days, so...
Oh, you don't want to tell me? That's okay, I understand. I don't remember anything about the siege.
You don't? Wow. But you said on the phone.
Don't remember what I said. Must be age.
Charles Dexter Ward seemed to believe that Joseph Kerwin was his grandfather.
That's not enough to get you knocking on my door.
Ward's tutor was a woman called Barbara Sayers. We believe that Barbara Sayers had been in a relationship with Joseph Kerwin and that she was one of his acolytes.
Well, that seems like a coincidence, doesn't it?
If you believe in coincidences.
Well, now I think I may remember that siege you're talking about.
Here's a thing.
The mind plays tricks at my age.
Well, let me jog your memory. Your name is on the arrest reports, which actually I'm confused about because I thought it was an FBI or ATF thing.
ATF, mainly.
So how come the arrest reports were filled out by...
Okay, so how these things work. The feds are here like the big guns. They want the glory. They don't want to do the work. They take the big guy alive, sure, they'll do that paperwork and take the credit. But if you pinheads looking at firearms or narco charges, they hand that shit off to local PD.
Okay, but you were there at the siege.
If you can call it that, yeah, I was there.
What would you call it?
Okay, you knocked on the right door today. I haven't talked about this before because, well, at the time they shut the whole thing down. And opening my mouth would have meant my job. But I guess now I'm retired and no one who was there is still around, so who gives a shit what I say? And you're the first person in maybe 20 years who's asked the question. So, how it went down. You got some people holed up in this old house in Pawtuxet. Probably they're mostly minding their own business. But some local people have started making complaints about their behavior. Toing and froing and noise and intimidation and whatnot. So a couple of uniforms get sent down out of Cranston. And they knock on the door. And all they're going to do is inform the folks there that there's been a complaint. Take a look around. Make sure nothing untoward is going on. Everyone knows these guys are religious or whatever of some stripe. And chances are they're harmless. But you want to kick up a little dust. Make sure they don't have kids in there or whatever. Like it might be a welfare problem. Or any kind of abuse is going on. So that's all there was to it. But when these two uniforms knock on the door, they get fired upon. And someone shoots the shit out of their patrol car with an assault rifle.
Wow.
So now this goes from being a thing that just needed to be checked out to being a house full of religious lunatics shooting at cops. So the next thing that happens is the ATF and the FBI have to put their dicks on the table and see who's is biggest. If anyone's being held against their will, that's a kidnapping and it's an FBI show. But there's no evidence that's the case, so the FBI have to hit the bench. And it's ATF's deal, because there's firearms. But ATF is always going to call the local PD for assistance. We used to refer to it as human shields. Cranston PD aren't up for the job, despite their guys being there at the start of it, because their chief is a big sissy. So it gets kicked up to my chief in Providence. Which means me and my buddies find ourselves shipping out to get shot at in the ass end of nowhere.
I'll spare you the details that Ezra could not be persuaded to spare me. ATF ran the raid, and their guys were the first through the door, along with the SWAT team from Providence. Ezra wasn't in the thick of it. He and his partner were stationed at a roadblock on the perimeter to pick up anyone who tried to flee.
Except no one tried to get out by road, because they had the tunnels, which no one knew about.
Ezra said there were tunnels underneath the house.
Yeah, we didn't discover those tunnels until after we took the house.
They probably weren't dug by Kerwin's people. It's more likely they were way older, and to do with pirates and smugglers operating in the area a century or more before. But Kerwin's people knew about them, and that's how most of them, including presumably Barbara Sayers, got out and evaded capture. So how long did this thing last?
Oh, it was pretty fast. It wasn't one of those days-long things like the Branch Davidians, or that's why no one really knows about it. The whole thing's over and done in maybe an hour or two. Which means there's no time to get news cameras down there, no drama to build up. That's why I say it wasn't really a siege. Some people in a house. We go to the house, there's an exchange of gunfire, and then we prevail.
And was Joseph Kerwin killed, or did he take his own life?
Well, now you see, there's the thing of it. Because I read the official report, and that said there was an exchange of gunfire. Joseph Kerwin was killed. ATF agents went in there and swept the place, recovered some firearms and narcotics, and that was the end of it.
Okay.
Well, that's not what I saw. First off, yeah, our side definitely won the firefight. And the ATF guys breached the house and they cleared it all out. But I never saw them bring Kerwin's body out. Now, a buddy of mine, who's since passed on, was on the SWAT team. And he swore blind that Kerwin locked himself up in a room inside the house. He shot through the door. They shot back, and then they breached the room. But he wasn't there. There was no one in there. It was an interior room. No windows, no other doors, no way down through the floor or up through the ceiling. He said all that was there was this dust.
Dust?
Yeah, like a thick gray dust. Like ash, he said. And it was everywhere. Like someone had burst a bag of the stuff right in the middle of the room.
So what was the dust?
Who knows? My buddy was told to file a report that said they breached the room, found Kerwin's body, and took it away. Well, that's not what happened.
Did he talk to anyone about this?
No. He only told me a few years back, after he got diagnosed and knew his clock was ticking. But how it would be today, it was different back then. The feds tell you what to put in your report, that's what you write down. Unless you want to find yourself hauled up on some bullshit and busted out of the force with no pension.
Okay, so...
But that's not the strangest part.
No?
Once the house was secured, ATF sent their team down into the basement, and that's when they found the tunnels. So they send a handful of guys down into those tunnels to find anyone might be hiding down there. Now, I heard afterwards that every single one of the guys who went down there subsequently ended up getting discharged from the force on mental health grounds.
Is that true?
It's what I heard. What's true is that they sealed that house up for a while and no one was allowed in. Then the whole place was demolished and the tunnels were sealed up.
And the people you processed? The people who got arrested?
Kooks.
Right.
Like way beyond crazy. My guess, these guys were low level. Like new recruits. Because they're up top, okay? So they're either gonna get shot or they're gonna get busted. But really, they're just there to buy time for the more senior people to get into those tunnels and get out of there.
So, had they been, like, brainwashed?
Well, that would be outside my area of expertise. And they were each given a psych evaluation, but no psychiatric report was ever filed.
That's unusual, right?
Oh, sure.
That's a
This whole thing, they put a lid on it and screwed it down tight. You have to understand, something like this happens, standard procedure is, you launch an investigation into the cult itself. You figure out who might have been there by talking to neighbors, to the missing persons cops, because you want to know who got away. Because these people just shot at the cops, so they're still dangerous, right?
I can't.
You want to catch those guys. None of that happened. Those ATF guys came out of those tunnels. They told their boss whatever they saw down there. And the next thing, they're drawing a line under the whole business. Destroy the house, seal the tunnels, ship the ATF guys off to the nut house, wipe the slate. Never happened. Now, I talked with these people we arrested, and in my opinion, I don't know what drugs they've been taking, or what they'd been told by this Kerwin guy, but they were broken. Like insane. And I'm not talking about what they said, because really they didn't say much of anything. But the look in their eyes, it was like there was nothing going on back there. You've seen that photo of the guy in Vietnam with a 1,000-yard stare? That famous picture?
Sure.
That's what these guys look like. Like they didn't even know what planet they were on.
Wow.
Wow is right.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there.
There is. He wants to help.
Who? The cop?
Ex-cop. Retired. Ezra, yeah.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
It is. I'm worried Joseph Kerwin is a red herring.
Oh, okay, but his connection to Barbara Sayers...
I know, but even Barbara Sayers is... Charles Dexter Ward disappeared from a locked room. A year later, his doctor comes to England and murders someone. Are we getting away from that story here?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's all relevant.
I want to know more about what Ward was doing before Willett put him in the asylum.
Sure, but if you're a retired cop, can pull some strings.
Yeah.
I think I realised then that Kennedy's problem wasn't really with where the story was leading us, it was that we weren't controlling it sufficiently. And that was because I wasn't pulling my weight. That's not an easy thing to admit, and it's certainly not an easy thing to broadcast. But, okay, sidebar. As a lot of listeners probably know, I was a freelance columnist before I started Red Hook. We managed to get a little seed money together to make these podcasts, but because we don't want to host advertising, we rely on monthly donations from listeners to keep going. We've been ticking over fine, mostly, and we've even managed to pay some researchers to work on upcoming shows for us. But this particular story, the Charles Dexter Ward mystery, has involved Kennedy going out to America, and so that suddenly becomes an expensive thing. It's not to complain or anything, this is what we chose to do, and we're making a good go of it, but if you've been wondering, as I think Kennedy had, about was I pulling my weight in this investigation, the answer was no. And sitting in the cafe then, I realised that the first priority has to be with the story. Now, it's true that a lot of the source material so far was coming from America, so that was Kennedy's wheelhouse, but we knew that because Willett came to London and murdered Lucy Hawthorne, there must be a London angle. So I put the admin on hold and headed out to try and keep my end of the investigative bargain.
I've come to the London Library, which is not the ideal place to record audio, and they really don't like it.
We talked last time about trying to work out if Lucy Hawthorne was a random victim choice for Dr. Willett, or for the reason he targeted her. My documentary producer contact pointed out that Lucy was the granddaughter of Sir Godfrey Tillinghast, ex-cabinet secretary. He seemed to think this might be worth digging into, so I've come to look at the relevant issues of Debrett's to find out a little more about the Tillinghast family. Okay. Godfrey Tillinghast. Here we go. His father was Lord Ambrose Tillinghast, of course he was. We weren't expecting to find evidence of a thriving meritocracy at work here. Godfrey married Caroline Hughes in 1962. Emma is born soon after. Oh, very soon after. Actually, suspiciously soon after. Maybe a shotgun wedding. Meteoric rise through the ranks of the civil service, though he was hardly starting from the ground floor. Looking back, education, Winchester, Oxford, blah, blah, blah. Siblings. Okay, Godfrey has a sister called Eliza, 3 years younger. Okay, where are you, Eliza? Okay, so you don't rate Debrett's, Eliza. Bad luck, old girl. Let's see if there's a accuser. Ah. Okay.
Why the fuck?
Eliza.
That's fine. Okay, that makes sense.
Born 1940 to Lord Ambrose Tillinghast and Lady Beatrice Tillinghast. Rodine, finishing school in Geneva. I see. So, Caroline Hughes was a friend of yours from back then, and that's presumably how your brother hooked up with her. God, these people. Okay, then what? Where did you go? Did you die? Ah, no. You moved to America in 62. He had a baby girl in 1963, roughly the same time as Emma Tillinghast was born. So you and Caroline got pregnant at the same time, both out of wedlock. But in your case, the father didn't do the decent thing. I can't imagine that went down well. Did Lord Ambrose pay for your ticket out of your money to spare the family the embarrassment? The baby is a little girl called Sarah, and then she in turn... Oh, Jesus. Jesus Christ.
Hello?
I've got the connection.
Matt? I'm just going through airport
Yeah, I've
security.
got the connection.
What? I don't know what you're...
Lucy Hawthorne's granddad was Sir Godfrey Tillinghast.
Yeah, I'm just finishing up.
Sir Godfrey had a sister called Eliza. She got pregnant out of wedlock in 1962, and she moved to America to have the baby. The baby was a girl called Sarah Tillinghast.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Hold on a second. So fine, I'll step out of the line. Is me standing here on my phone a security risk? I understand that, so I'll step out of the line.
Kennedy!
Asshole, sorry, yeah.
Are you with me?
Sarah Tillinghast.
Godfrey's sister, Eliza, has a baby.
Sarah, yes, get to the point.
Sarah Tillinghast, in 1991, in Providence, Rhode Island, marries Howard Philip Ward.
What?
Sarah Tillinghast was Charles Dexter Ward's mother.
You are shitting me. So the connection, Lucy Hawthorne and Charles Dexter Ward.
Second cousins. Willett didn't pick a random victim. He killed the last remaining person in the Tillinghast line.
Huh.
Hello, I'm Matthew Price, and alongside Tina Dahealy, I host the Beyond Today podcast from the BBC. Each weekday, we're going to be tackling some of the biggest news stories with help from some of the best and most informed journalists in the BBC. It's the news podcast that jumps right in to give you that little bit more. So, make sure you head over to the BBC Sounds app, search for Beyond Today, and subscribe. And if you'd like to join in the chat, use the hashtag BBC Beyond.
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Before we start, I just wanted to talk about something, or I guess make an announcement, really. Last episode, I was talking about how hard it is to keep a show like this, a company like this, going financially. And I hate to break the fourth wall like that and kind of let the light in on the magic, so to speak. But I thought it was important to explain why I hadn't been doing any of the heavy lifting thus far on the Charles Dexter Ward story. Anyway, the response from listeners was really encouraging. A lot of you wrote in messages of support, and we saw a definite uptick in the number of people pledging monthly donations via the website, which wasn't what I was trying for, but it's always nice, so thank you.
How the hell?
The really stunning thing, though, is that we got one particular donation. It was an overseas money transfer from the US, and it's a lot of money, or it's a lot of money to us. It means we can keep going for the rest of the year, which is amazing. The money was transferred from a legal firm called Hutchinson & Orme, who are based in Boston. So I've just been on the phone to them, and I've checked that it's okay to give out their name, but I have no way of knowing where the money actually came from, because they won't tell me who their client is. But they told me it's a donation, not sponsorship or payment in kind or anything like that. I spoke to Simon Orme, the partner in the law firm, and he said that his client was a fan of the show and had been listening last week when I talked about how hard it was to keep the show going. And so this client has put enough money in our account that we can carry on. So if our mysterious benefactor is listening right now, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the series and that you feel at the end of it that we spent your money wisely. So I guess we're here for the duration now, all the way to the bitter end. So let's get on with it. This is episode 4 of the case of Charles Dexter Ward. If you're just joining us, I'd advise you to start at episode 1 and work your way through.
I know what I need to do,
Still
I just
here?
don't know how to get in this fucking
Okay, then.
room.
I'm
Trying to
Matthew
think.
Hayward, and this is The Mystery Machine.
Who is Dr. Allen, Charles?
I don't know.
Your father tells me you've been seeing a man named Dr. Allen, but your father doesn't know this man either. Is he someone Miss Sayers knows? Because I can't find anyone under that name registered in the area. What kind of doctor is he?
He's a scientist.
A scientist.
We're working on some experiments.
What kind of experiment?
Dr. Allen worked with my grandfather.
Is man Kerwin? Yes, I've done some reading of my own on Joseph Kerwin. I'm not sure you should be so quick to blame him as a relative, Charles.
Well, you can't choose your family, Doctor.
This is one of the handful of recordings we have from Dr. Willett's archive. The notes that accompany this suggest that it was around this time that Willett first tried to have Charles Dexter Ward committed to his care in the asylum.
Can we talk about these disturbances in the night, Charles?
We can talk about whatever you like, Doctor.
Your father is concerned.
That statement is always true.
He said he heard you arguing with someone in the early hours of this morning. He said he heard 2 voices, raised voices. He stood outside your door and he became convinced that both voices were you.
Perhaps it's my father you should be treating as a patient.
Who are you talking to, Charles?
I was sound asleep.
Your father said he knocked on the door and you answered it fully dressed. Said you became abusive.
Perhaps he was
His jaw
dreaming.
is badly bruised this morning. I examined him myself. So was I dreaming? Am I dreaming right now as I look at the swollen knuckles on your right hand, Charles?
So what was going on with Charles Dexter Ward?
Oh,
we think
shit, I
this
didn't
was
pick
all
up the-
started by Charles's discovery of some written correspondence between Barbara Sayers, the woman who was to become his tutor, and a local cult leader named Joseph Kerwin. Subsequent to that discovery, Charles became convinced that Joseph Kerwin was actually his grandfather. We now know that Charles's grandmother was a woman called Eliza Tillinghast. She fell pregnant in England and moved to America to have the baby in 1963. So, if Joseph Kerwin was the father, that means he was in England in 1962. What was he doing here?
The amount of silly dabbling in the occult that goes on today scares me. These people think that they're doing something terribly clever and terribly with it, and it's all great fun. And what they don't understand is that they're invoking forces which they can't stand, and they're making themselves a channel by which those forces can filter into the world.
The revival of public interest in witchcraft is one of those curious features of life today. But it's very difficult to get at the truth of what it's all about. On one estimate, there are 30,000 people practicing in witchcraft in this country alone. A more conservative figure would be 8,000. But even so, it's enough to make you think. Are there really dangers involved? Or is it all just a delusion? And if it is just a delusion, why do so many really quite intelligent people half believe in it? Just what has been going on in this country since the last of the witchcraft laws was repealed in 1951?
Those were archived clips from a 1971 BBC documentary called The Power of the Witch. The programmes were made in response to growing interest in witchcraft at the time in the UK. We might think of the swinging 60s in terms of music and fashion and a sudden explosion of popular culture, but it also marked a period of sexual liberation. The rise of feminism and a cultural undercurrent that rejected social norms and, as seen in a lot of hippie culture, drew its practitioners towards a kind of nostalgia for the rural world. It's really not surprising then that these conditions would prove ripe for a resurgence of paganism and witchcraft. We know that Joseph Curwen was into this stuff by the time his cult was involved in a shootout with police in Rhode Island in 1980. But it turns out that his interest in it started way
How
early,
the fuck do I get
and
up
we can
there?
certainly date it to 1957 in the New Forest. I've got a few lines here from the Lymington Gazette dated November the 2nd, 1957, under the headline, "Police Break Up Satanic Halloween Ritual." It reads, "Police in Lyndhurst report breaking up a meeting of alleged witches just after midnight on October 31st, it's Halloween,
else in
in the forest near Buckler's Hard. Following complaints from local residents of bonfires, loud chanting and nudity. Several participants were arrested, among them the group's leader, Mr. Joseph Curwen, of no fixed abode. All were released without charge the following morning." So, there he is. Joseph Curwen, 1957, The New Forest. The no fixed abode bit makes him hard to track down, and there are no more newspaper reports on him from that time.
Well, there's been a coven in the New Forest since at least the 1930s.
Dr. Eleanor Peck is a lecturer in early modern history and the author of several books on the history of witchcraft in Britain and Europe. When I started looking into these New Forest witches, I discovered that Dr. Peck had written about them. I got in touch and we talked about what Kennedy and I had discovered, and when I mentioned Joseph Curwen's name, she invited me to her home down in Lewes in Sussex.
Gerald Gardner, the guy who styled himself as the originator of the modern Wicca movement, claimed he was admitted to the New Forest Coven in 1938. He says he took part in a ritual there a few years later that successfully halted the German advance through Europe.
Is that how it happened?
Well, there's the thing about magic. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. We did a ritual to stop Hitler. Hitler was stopped, therefore our ritual worked.
Well, that and the Allied forces.
Yeah, but would the Allied forces have prevailed without the New Forest Coven's intervention?
I'm going to go with yes.
So would most people. But actually, either position is equally impossible to prove.
In 1938, Gerald Gardner, a British occultist and sometime associate of Aleister Crowley, claimed to have been admitted into a secret coven of witches in the New Forest. The leader of the coven was a woman Gardner only referred to as Old Dorothy. There's been a lot of speculation as to who Old Dorothy really was, and a few reputations have been ruined over the years as accusations were thrown around in what was a pretty conservative Christian part of the world.
Old Dorothy, yeah. For the longest time, people thought it referred to this woman who was a senior figure in the community and a key member of the local church. Of course, that played into all the conspiracy theories about the establishment dabbling in the black arts and all that. But it's actually more likely that Gardner had something against this woman and was deliberately seeking to damage her reputation.
That's kind of a dick move.
That's something you notice over and over again within the occult community. There are these guys like Crowley who are basically just into manipulating people. Gerald Gardner actually asked Crowley to join the Wicca movement early on. You know what Crowley said? There's no money in it. We're never going to find out who Old Dorothy really was, or if she even existed. But there's an interesting little nugget there, especially interesting to you if you're looking at Joseph Curwen. There's one piece of Gardner's correspondence from about 1943 where he refers to Old Dorothy as Ipku Aya.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So, this is the Mesopotamian sorcerer who Curwen was obsessed with?
Well, they all were. The New Forest people, Jack Parsons, the Process Church of the Final Judgment, Manson.
What, as in Charles Manson?
Oh, yeah. Joseph Curwen was hanging out with Manson and Anton LaVey in California in 67, 68. He dropped out of sight just before the murders, just like he did in New York in 76 before all the Son of Sam killings. Oh, you found a juicy character there. But all these guys were deep into the whole Ipku Aya Mesopotamian thing, but it never really came out because the second anyone mentions the word Satan, that's what the tabloids all seem to put, because they didn't realise that not only is Satan not considered to be as all-out evil as the movies would have us believe,
But he wasn't
God damn
even
it.
a big part of the pantheon for these
This is
fools.
where I died.
The name is recognisable to Joe Public. It's easier to spell than Ipkuaya.
Yeah,
That's it. To unpack it.
Welcome to my career.
Going back to the New Forest in the early 60s, though, Joseph Kerwin was still there.
Yeah, mid-50s to about 63, 64. He was
Stamina.
hanging around within the Wicca movement. The Gardnerians, they called, after Gerald Gardner rather dubiously claimed credit for the whole thing. But I don't know that Kerwin was the leader of any particular coven for very long. Wicca covens can be every bit as political and changeable as any other community.
Is there anyone still around from that time who might remember it?
Well, I found a woman called Amelia Fenner, who's still alive, just. She's not there anymore, though. She lives in a nursing home now, in Barnet, of all places. She loves to talk about the good old days, though you want to take some of it with a pinch of salt. Most of these people are much better at lying than they are at magic.
Oh my god. Kerwin knew Manson?
Oh, she rattled off a whole list of groups that he was involved with. Half of them I've never heard of. But if Kerwin was this kind of guru cult figure in that world, and Charles Dexter Ward is already into that stuff, and then he finds out Kerwin might be his granddad,
That'd be like finding out your grandma was borking Jim Morrison.
and more than that, you could share DNA with Jim Morrison.
And if Kerwin is as strange as he sounds, then maybe Charles Ward is acting weird as a kind of emulation?
Yeah, or maybe he's trying to finish the great work, and that turns him a little weird.
Great work.
That's the thing, apparently. Eleanor Peck was talking about it. These witches and wizards often have these projects they're striving to complete, to bring back someone from the dead or raise a demon or whatever.
Do you think Willett started to buy into this? Like, if he started to think Ward was onto something? That he really was dangerous?
If he'd killed Ward, maybe. But it's hard to see what Lucy Hawthorne would have to do with any of that. She was related to Ward, but I don't think she was into this stuff. I don't think they knew each other existed. And how's it going there?
I got nothing. I'm trying to fill in the blanks on Ward. What he was doing between getting kicked out of school and getting locked up in the asylum. I've got calls in to the warden of the hospital, some of Willett's colleagues. No one's getting back to me at the moment. And I'm trying to figure out where all Ward's stuff went.
What stuff?
Anything. He checked into the psychiatric hospital with just the clothes he was wearing. I checked with the realtor guy, Sylvester Birtwistle. That never gets old. And he said that there was practically nothing of Charles Ward's in the house when they took possession of it. So where's all his stuff? All these occult books he supposedly had. The letters he and Tyler Green found.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm getting nowhere with it, though. I think this week is going to be all you.
Well, I have to go and talk to a very old lady. Let's hope she's entertaining. I feel like I'm standing right on the edge of London. Behind me, the suburban streets of Barnet head through into London proper and miles of metropolis. But across the road, from where I'm standing, there's just an old Victorian building that might once have been a manor house or something. And beyond it, there's nothing but fields and trees rolling off into the distance. This is the nursing home where Amelia Fenner, as far as we can tell, the last surviving member of Joseph Kerwin's coven in the New Forest, now lives.
She's quite sprightly, considering, certainly compared to a lot of our guests, and she's all there too, sharp as a tack. Oh, Amy, one visitor is here.
Miss Fenner?
It's Amy, love.
Amy is 85 years old, but as she was quick to point out, she's still in possession of most of her faculties.
Hearing's not so bad considering, and I could still give all these buggers a run for their money on the dance floor.
I'd spoken to Amy briefly on the phone, so she knew why I was here and what I wanted to talk about. She was cagey until the nurse had brought our drinks, but once everyone else was out of earshot, she opened up a bit.
I don't mind talking about this now, because there's not many of them left, really, is there?
I think you're the last of them.
The last you can find, maybe. Or the last who'll own up to it.
You think there are others?
Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm 85. I'll start at the beginning, and I'll go to the end, or else we'll both get bloody confused, won't we?
And when she said the beginning, that's exactly what she meant. Amelia Fenner was born in 1933 in Whitechapel. She was evacuated down to Somerset during the Blitz. Her father was in the RAF, and he was shot down and killed in the Battle of Britain. Her mother never remarried and died soon after the end of the war. Amelia and her two older sisters finished up their childhood in a children's home. Her sisters both got married and moved away. Amelia realised she preferred the peace and quiet of the countryside to the hustle and bustle of 50s London, so she moved down to Hampshire and got a job in a stables, which is something she gained some experience of during her evacuation. It was one of the friends she made there who introduced her to the coven.
It was just a bit of a laugh as far as I was concerned. prancing about in the forest. Silly, isn't it? But my friend said they always had booze with them. Other stuff, sometimes. Not like I had anything better to do of an evening.
When would this have been?
Oh, I suppose 1958, 59, when I first started going.
So, Joseph Kerwin was...
Oh, yes. He was the high priest then. Extraordinary man.
In what way?
Brilliant, energetic, inspiring, charismatic. Oh, I was so nervous the first time. Like I say, it did all just seem a bit silly. If you can imagine going to church with no idea of what to expect, the prayers, the hymns, the costumes. I suppose all rituals are a bit strange the first time. And there's a stigma to dancing around in the woods, isn't there? Even more of a stigma then with everyone being nude and this being the 1950s.
You
Oh, completely naked most of the time. It's all about getting closer to nature. I remember Joseph explaining that to me. And that first time, I'd made an absolute pact with myself that I wasn't taking off a stitch. I'd heard the stories mainly from my friend who was already involved, and she'd said, come along. I remember saying to her, I was going to be wearing my hat and coat, and I had no intention of so much as loosening a button. And she laughed when I said that, because I suppose she knew the reality of the whole thing. And she was completely right. We got there, drank some of the tea they'd made, and then Joseph approached me and welcomed me as a new initiate. I don't think I even knew what the word meant. And 5 minutes later, I'm standing there, naked as the day I was born and not a care in the world.
How did he persuade you? Can you remember?
Oh, I don't think it would have mattered what he said. It was the tea, dear, you see? Laced with hallucinogenic mushrooms, of course. I can't begin to describe how it feels to be part of a ritual. To be a part of something so much bigger. It's like lightning strikes and it passes through you. You're a conduit for this great power, but it doesn't hurt you and it doesn't stop with you. It passes through. But while it's passing, it fills you and enables you, and you get this fleeting feeling, the smallest taste of what that power feels like, what it would be like to wield it. And then it's gone.
Apart from the feelings, did you ever witness anything, that you could objectively say was supernatural?
If I said yes, would you believe me?
I believe that you believed it.
If you only knew.
You what?
You're asking me about a man called Joseph Kerwin. A man you believe was born at a certain time and did these particular things and then died?
Well,
No, you're speaking of Ipku Aya. But you only see a fraction of his existence in time. The briefest moment when he was a man called Joseph Kerwin, but before that, he was others. And after that...
I don't understand it.
Oh, I know, dear. No, it's all right.
Was there a woman called Caroline Hughes in the coven at that time? She might have been with someone called Eliza.
Those two?
You knew them?
The posh ones. Oh, we all thought they were just slumming it at first. They showed up after I'd been there a couple of years. Joseph was up and down to London, and there was talk he was making friends with the establishment. Witchcraft was becoming very fashionable amongst that lot. Probably they were attracted to all the nudity and sex. Your face. It was all sex, dear. Sex magic. That's what we were doing in that forest. What did you think? Pointy hats and broomsticks?
I didn't...
You haven't lived. Anyway, yes, one day Joseph shows up with these two posh London girls, one on each arm. And we all thought he just brought them there to show off. That they were, what do you call it, dilettantes, come down for one night cavorting in the forest, then go back to London to tell all their friends in Chelsea or wherever how hedonistic they'd been. Oh, but we were wrong. Joseph had chosen well. They stuck it out and became his favoured acolytes.
What does that mean?
Well, it means they shagged him a lot, but then so did the brother, so that wasn't necessarily...
The brother?
One of them had a brother, I don't remember which one.
Was it Eliza?
No, I don't remember.
Can you remember his name?
There were a lot of men.
Joseph didn't discriminate when it came to sex. Homosexual magic is very powerful for certain rituals. But the girls you're talking about, they were there for Ipku Aya.
Right.
To continue the bloodline.
Because Ipku Aya was possessing Joseph Kerwin.
No, not possession. Joseph was the living form of Ipku Aya. But the mortal body only lasts so long, so another vessel must always be ready. And the vessel must be of the bloodline.
So he was intending to get one of the girls pregnant.
Intending, he did. Both of them. But something happened, some kind of falling out with the brother. Oh, Joseph had a temper on him, and when he lashed out, didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. One of those girls took a beating, and the brother, Jeffrey. That was his name. No, it wasn't. Gerald. Godfrey, that was it. That would have kept me awake. Anyway, Godfrey took both of the girls back to London. No more contact with the coven. He must have had some sway, because that's when all the police raids really started in earnest. Joseph disappeared a week or so later. No warning, he just didn't show up one night, and no one ever heard from him again. Well, we struggled on without him, but it was a rudderless ship, and we all ended up going our separate ways. My friend and I left around then, joined up with some Wiccans over near Winchester. Wasn't the same, but...
And you never heard from Joseph Kerwin again?
No. Rumours now and again. He was in London, he was in Paris, he'd gone to the Far East, and then... the thing in America when the Joseph Kerwin vessel was destroyed.
But not Ipku Aya?
No, not as long as the bloodline was intact.
And what about Caroline and Eliza and Godfrey?
No idea. Within the coven, there's no social barriers. There's a hierarchy, but we're all equal in the eyes of the high priest. But outside of that, they're not mixing with the likes of me. They'd left that night. Never saw or heard from any of them again.
Post-interview notes following my conversation with Amy Fenner.
Yes, mate.
I just did bourbon on ice, thanks. Large one. I need to get some legal clarification on the implications of using any of the stuff Amy said about Godfrey Tillinghast.
Hey, Matthew. Long time no see, all right?
I don't know you guys do.
Yeah, you know us. Don't worry about it. Come on, outside.
No, sorry. Look, guys, whatever you...
Let's make that your last episode, shall we?
Well, hey, hello. So before you stop listening...
You can't start it with hey, hello. We're not in California. Okay, go row again.
All right. Hello, I'm Rohan Silva, and I'm an entrepreneur.
And I'm Kamal Ahmed, and I'm not. We are launching a new podcast. It is about entrepreneurs, and it's for everybody.
It's called The Disruptors, and it features the stories of founders, people who've started businesses, how they did what they did, and all the challenges and ups and downs they went through to get there.
Plenty of dark moments and plenty of inspirational stories told by the people who experienced it. Subscribe to The Disruptors on BBC Sounds.
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Oh, hey, Matt, it's me. It's like midnight there? I thought you'd be around. Call me back. Actually, don't worry. No, call me back because I want to talk to you about some stuff. Okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to send these sound files through to you because I have to go out. So I'm just going to throw them into audio notes and so you know what's what. But call me back. I'm here for another half an hour or so, and I want to hear how your meeting with the witch went. Okay? Cool. Talk to you later. Okay, so hi, it's me. The first thing is a recording of a letter from Charles Dexter Ward to Dr. Willett. This is pretty late on in the relationship, just before Charles was committed to the asylum. called just now because I wanted to give you some context for how we found this. But I think it should play out up top, and then the explanation comes closer to the end of the show. But I'll throw something in later so you know where it goes. I'm going to email you the actual text of the letter, but this recording is George Shepley, the library guy, reading the letter out because I wanted to hear it in a man's voice. And yes, I know what you're thinking, shut up. So you could use this. I think it's an okay recording, but also you could get it redone by Justin or someone. Anyway, here it is, and I think it should play out on top.
This is a letter from Charles Dexter Ward to Dr. Willett. It's dated January 26, 2016. Dear Dr. Willett, the time has come for me to finally be honest about what's been happening. I've shown incredible patience with him these past few years, and I know I haven't always been the easiest of patients or the most rewarding. I appreciate all the help you have given me. I really thought I was onto something with my research. I thought something amazing, something world-changing would come of it, for the good of everyone. I had hoped to show you and my father and everyone else who that I was right all along. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. What I have stumbled on here is something truly terrible, something horrifying. And now I must ask for your help once again. We need to stop this. It feels ridiculous to write these words, and I'm sure it must seem equally ridiculous reading them. But please believe me when I tell you that the future of the world is at stake here. What they did to Joseph Curwen at the Pawtuxet House needs to happen again, as soon as possible. My research and experiments have brought to light a monstrous abnormality. Now, for the sake of all life on this planet, you must help me destroy it. I've left the trailer park forever, and you must destroy the trailer there and everything in it and beneath it. I know I sound crazy, but I promise you I have not been this clear-headed since all this began. It's as if a veil has been lifted suddenly, and bright light is shining down, showing me everything I have done wrong and the terrible things I have brought upon me. Please come to the house on Prospect Street first thing tomorrow. If anyone but me answers the door, go straight to the police. Otherwise, we will head out to the trailer park and do what needs to be done. Bring guns and gasoline. I can only imagine how all this sounds. Please, just give me the benefit of the doubt one more time. I hope to see you in the morning. Best, Charles. P.S. Shoot Dr. Allen on sight and dissolve his body in acid. Don't burn it.
That's pretty wild, right? But like I say, I think it works really well as a tease, and then we put it into context later. So next there's a recording I made outside the asylum, and I'm not sure if it's useful or not. I'm standing outside the psychiatric hospital, which was Charles Dexter Ward's home from February 2016 until he vanished without a trace from his room the following March. I thought it might be useful to get a sense of where he was living and how secure his room actually was. Unfortunately, though, this place doesn't allow visitors, except in exceptional circumstances, and all our attempts to get an appointment with the warden have been unsuccessful. I can give you a sense of what this place looks like from the outside, though. If you've ever seen the movie Shutter Island, or if you're a fan of the Batman comics, and you can picture Arkham Asylum, we think of those things as being kind of gothic exaggerations of reality, but let me disabuse you of that notion. This building looks exactly like it was the inspiration for those places. It's a big old gothic stone pile, bars on the windows, huge oak front door set into a stone arch. It certainly isn't a place that anyone just walks out of. So that's maybe good for atmosphere or whatever. The warden won't speak to me, and neither will anyone else who works with me. I even went and hung out at the bar down the street because I figured the guards and whatnot would come in after their shift. And a few did come in, but none of them would talk to me. I guess they've been warned off by the warden or someone. Then I got this call that night. The dude didn't give his name, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the guards who I approached in the bar. There's no way to identify him, so I can't corroborate what he says. We might need to get someone to listen to it and make sure the warden or whoever can't sue us. The guy's using something to disguise his voice, though, which makes it sound pretty cool. Hello?
Kennedy Fisher.
Who's this?
I wanted to speak to someone.
You work at the psychiatric hospital?
My friend was there the night Ward disappeared.
Your friend? And what did this friend see?
Ward was a freak.
Freak how?
He talked to himself.
Is that unusual in a place like that?
The person he was talking to wasn't him.
Don't know what that...
He changed. Physically. The time he was there. His hair got darker. His body shape changed.
All right, I don't... Are you saying he lost weight because maybe the food?
Not even shorter. He was 3 inches shorter a year after he was admitted.
I don't understand.
The man who disappeared from that cell was not the same man we locked up.
Okay.
No one is talking about the dust.
The dust.
My friend was in the room when they discovered the board was missing. He said there was dust everywhere.
I don't understand what you mean.
Gray dust, like ash, covering everything.
What's the significance of the dust?
I don't... Talk to Lyman about this.
Who's Lyman?
Lyman knows. Talk to Lyman.
Hello? Hello? So, obviously, the two things I'm into here are this business of him talking to himself, because that came up in the recording we have of Ward with Willet, where they're talking about Ward's dad saying he was talking to himself. This thing about the dust. The guard says there was dust covering everything in the cell, and that's exactly what the cop, Ezra Whedon, said about the room they expected to find Joseph Kerwin's body in. Now, I can't corroborate either of those accounts, and they might never be able to. But this is two separate people who shouldn't know about the other, telling a version of the same story. So there's that.
Bastard.
And then we get to this Lyman character. Now, I've put a document package together for you, and I'm going to upload it with this audio. One of the things you're going to find in there is a list of employees at the psychiatric hospital at the time Ward disappeared. Willet is on the list, obviously, and I've circled a couple of names who might be our deep throat guard. There's no Lyman there, but Willet is only listed with the hospital as a consultant, and he had a separate practice, which is how come he had Charles as a patient all those years. The place closed down when Willet got arrested, though it doesn't look like he was paying it that much attention in the year before that either. The website is still up, but it just lists Willet and some admin people in the staff list. I made a couple of calls to find out who covered for Willet when he was away or at hospital or whatever, and sure enough, there's a Dr. Mark Lyman who came in as cover, and it turns out he and Willet went way back. Dr. Lyman? Dr. Lyman? My name is Kennedy Fisher. I work on a podcast called The Mystery Machine. We're doing a story that involves Dr. Willett, who I believe was a colleague.
I'm sorry. I'm late for an appointment.
If I could just take a few moments of your time.
I don't have a few minutes.
Well, then if we could arrange a convenient
I'm
time.
not talking about Willett to you or to anyone.
What about Charles Dexter Ward?
What about him?
What was really going on with him?
He was crazy.
Is that a technical term?
I'm late for an appointment.
Dr. Willett's been locked up for the rest of his life because they think he went nuts and stabbed a random stranger. Is that what you think happened?
I already said, I'm not talking
because
about...
I think there's more to it than that. And I'm offering an audience and a chance to get Dr. Willett's side of the story out.
I don't know what his side is.
You know about his work with Charles Ward. I'm betting you know more than came out after Ward disappeared. You probably don't need that, but I'm throwing it in case we're running under. So, spoiler alert, Dr. Lyman agreed to a meeting at his place later that evening.
All right, cards on the table. I don't know if Jonathan Willett is suffering from a neurological condition or not. He murdered that woman. And whether he believed he was justified, whether a professional would consider him to have been of sound mind at the time, that's still a crime. And it's still morally wrong, and I'm not condoning that in any way.
Understood.
That said, do I think Charles Dexter Ward contributed to the situation Jonathan found himself in? Absolutely, yes, I do. I'm gonna need some assurances.
Such as?
My professional reputation, and not to mention the ethics.
You're asking for approval.
How you people chop these things around, make what's said sound different out of context.
We don't do that. But it's absolutely not a problem for you to hear an edited version of this conversation before it goes out.
Jonathan Willett had known Charles Ward for a long time as a patient. Ward had certain behavioral difficulties that were neither particularly unusual nor particularly serious. A lot of parents would have relied on a school or a once-a-week counselor to deal with these kind of things. But the Ward family had money, and Charles was their only child, so they engaged Jonathan early and had him sit and talk to Charles twice a week.
What kind of behavior...
I can't answer that. But I can tell you that Willett was not concerned about Charles until that Sayers woman arrived on the scene.
Barbara Sayers.
Mm-hmm. She was the school librarian, I believe.
Of course it was the librarian.
And Jonathan quickly became concerned that she was exerting an undue influence on Charles Ward in terms of reading material she was allowing him access to.
I've seen the reading lists.
Well, as you know, Charles Ward was subsequently removed from school, and Barbara Sayers became his personal tutor.
How did Willett let that happen, if he already thought she was a bad influence?
She was clever. She persuaded Charles to modify his behavior around his parents to the extent that they thought Sayers was a force for good. On top of that, she persuaded them that Charles was actually some kind of misunderstood savant that the school couldn't cater to. And she pitched herself directly against Willett, and Willett lost, and the Wards let him go.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah. It was only after Sarah Ward's death that Howard brought him back in. By that time, Charles's behavior had escalated well beyond anything anyone could have predicted. Yeah. I remember how shocked Willett was after his first week back. He told me that Charles Ward had grown obsessed with this Joseph Kerwin character, the one who died in that siege over at Pawtuxet. Apparently he believed he was related to this Kerwin, that Kerwin was some kind of big deal in occult circles, and that there was some kind of great work that Charles was obligated to continue.
What kind of work?
I'm not gonna go there yet.
You have to understand that this is delusional behavior. I mean, you have a potentially fragile young mind that with the correct treatment could be repaired and nurtured. But instead, that mind has been filled with all this nonsense from these witchcraft books he was reading, and then that's amplified by whatever this dreadful Sayers woman was telling him. So now, Willett's work it's really cut out for him. Charles was apparently conducting experiments, attempting to make contact with something called, I forget what it was called, some old Persian or Syrian...
Ikuaya?
That sounds right.
Mesopotamian.
Whatever. It's a hook on which to hang delusions. I'm sure at this stage, anything would have worked equally well. Willett managed to get rid of Sayers, which was a promising start, but Charles' state of mind had really deteriorated in those years. The downward spiral was incredibly steep. I hesitate to mention it because it was hearsay and rumor, but Willett wasn't as quick to dismiss it as he might have been. You know about the grave robbing?
Okay, so that's a good breakpoint there, and I'm going to upload some press clippings I found from 2011 and 2012, which detail a spate of desecrations and supposed grave robbings from the local cemeteries here in Providence. As far as I can tell, no one was ever arrested for this, and there's obviously no way we can prove Charles Ward was behind it. I need you to look into this whole Ikuaya thing. Maybe talk to your witchcraft expert and see if there's anything to do with dead bodies or necromancy or whatever tied into this stuff. Okay, grave robbing.
Ward was apparently obsessed with this book called the Necronomicon.
Oh, okay, the Necronomicon. Yeah. I did some background on this, and it's kind of interesting. It's this book that was supposedly written in like 700 AD, but no one is really solid on whether it ever actually existed. The story is, this guy, Abdul al-Hazred, who was known as the Mad Poet of Sana'a, which is in Yemen, went on a kind of pilgrimage to the ruins of the city of Nineveh, which is in Mesopotamia. Nineveh is supposedly the place where Ikuaya was from. Anyway, Abdul al-Hazred goes to Nineveh and digs around there and finds who knows what, and then he heads out into the desert, and he spends the next 10 years apparently being taught, quote, the secrets of death, which he then goes back to Damascus and distills into this book, which he calls the Necronomicon. But, like I say, no one seems very clear on whether it, or even al-Hazred, ever actually existed.
The Necronomicon supposedly details methods of raising the dead from essential salts.
Essential salts?
No idea. It's nonsense, obviously. But Ward was obsessed with this book and told Willett that he had found portions of it online and had been sent selections of the text by his followers.
He had followers?
He claimed to have had followers. I can't stress enough that we are talking about a delusional mind here. This is not reportage.
But there's a possible link between someone who thinks they can raise the dead and someone robbing graves.
Well, that was Jonathan Willett's thinking.
Okay.
Willett took these concerns to Howard Ward, who was pretty ill by now. Howard tried to intervene. There was a big fight, and as a result, Ward moved all of his supposed research and experiments out of the house.
This was when?
Maybe 2013.
Okay, so this explains something. None of this stuff was in the house on Prospect Street, and it didn't go to the asylum with Ward.
No, he certainly wouldn't have been allowed it there.
So it got moved to another location. Do we know where?
No idea. I don't know if Willett knew either. And that relationship was coming to a head anyway. Before Howard Ward died, Charles managed to persuade him that Willett was no longer helping him, and Howard fired Willett and replaced him with a guy Charles found, a Dr. Allen. Now, I have never heard of Dr. Allen. He's certainly not registered in Rhode Island, and I've never been able to track him down.
So Willett got fired again?
That's right. No more contact between them. Charles was no longer a minor. His father had died. he could do what he pleased. And Willett didn't hear from Charles again until 2016. I'm going to stress at this point that I was working with Jonathan Willett in 2016, and he was nothing if not of sound mind. A more rational human being you really couldn't hope to meet. But in January 2016, he received a letter from Charles Dexter Ward. I never read that letter, but it
how much
certainly
is
seems
left
to
of
have
this
disturbed
podcast?
Jonathan.
Because I
They put the two
need
back
to
in touch
stop
again,
here.
and I believe it led directly to Ward being incarcerated.
Yeah, there's too much time left on that podcast episode. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. It is already after 11 o'clock. I'll be back tomorrow. Fuck it. I'll double save just to me. Double sure. I'll be back tomorrow with more of this or something. So, oh, actually, no. I get to do GoldenEye tomorrow. I'll do it for like a bit. And then I'll play more of this. But for now, I'm just going to... I need to go. I have work tomorrow, unfortunately. Thanks for stopping by. And, see you next time. Let's have some music, shall we? Go ahead and get this booted up. And, here we go.